Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Megan Beckley. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm the executive director at the Berea Chamber of Commerce, and I am very excited to be facilitating our third session of the Inclusion by Instinct series this morning, focusing on the disabilities community. And we have 5 really great panelists here with us this morning who all bring a very unique perspective to this conversation, and I'm super excited to hear from them. But before we kick things off, I wanted to just give a quick thank you and shout out to the presenting sponsors that helped us make this series possible, that helped us keep it free and open to everyone so that we could share this information, which is with as much of an audience base as we possibly could. So thank you to Baldwin Wallace and to Cuyahoga Community College for your support and for helping us spread the word about this series. So with that, I want to kind of dive right into it today because all of these panelists have such amazing stories to share and information to provide and insight on their personal experiences. So I want to give us as much time as possible to hear from them. So I am going to go around and just let everyone quickly introduce yourself so that we can understand who you are. If you want to talk a little bit about your professional role, your personal role, and just kind of the perspective you're bringing to today's conversation, that would be wonderful. And then we'll just kind of dive into some questions from there. So with that, Krista, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with you. Do you want to tell us a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Krista Allison. I am currently Ms. Wheelchair Ohio 2022. The perspective I bring to this is I'm a disabled individual. I utilize a wheelchair, and my platform is community accessibility. So when I was talking to Megan about this webinar, I was very interested because my platform is very near and dear to my heart. As we all know, community accessibility handles everything and anything. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you, Megan, for having me.
Awesome, thank you. And if you don't follow Krista on Facebook, she is out there really making stuff happen in the community. I was just joking with her before we got on, like, do you still have a full-time job, or is being Miss Wheelchair Ohio your full-time job now? And she was like, nope, I still have a real job too. So thank you. You're doing amazing advocacy work in the community. All right, Rin, let's go over to you. Do you want to say hello?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Rin Oliver, and I use they, them, or he, him pronouns. I am a software engineer and agile transformation coach at US Bank. And the perspective I bring to this conversation is that I am neurodivergent. I am autistic. I have ADHD, dyspraxia, and dyscalculia. I also have invisible physical disabilities resulting from an injury. And I have also auditory processing disorder. So thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you for being here. And I believe Rin is over in Louisiana, so it is 7 a.m. their time. So up extra early for us this morning. Thank you. All right, Connor, let's go over to you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Connor Kovalarczyk. My pronouns are he, him. I am a real estate agent. I'm a former social worker of 5 or 6 years as well, working for nonprofits. I met Megan at the Plexus QEO dinner, which is the LGBT Chamber of Commerce. I am colorblind, so I bring that perspective, and she asked me to come join today in on the conversation, and I'm happy to be here.
Just by happenstance, we were doing an icebreaker and sharing a fun fact about ourselves, and Connor said, I'm colorblind. And I said, that would be a helpful perspective for people to hear about. So thank you for being here this morning, Connor. I appreciate it. All right, Sarah, let's go over to you.
Well, hi, good morning. My name is Sarah Nelson. I am the Executive Director of Working Animals Giving Service for Kids, which is a Berea-based nonprofit training service dogs for children all the way up and through the age of 18. In fact, you'll hear from Nick in a second, and that's how he and I met. And on a more personal note, the perspective that I bring to this panel is that I am an epileptic, and I was diagnosed at age 2, symptomatic from age 1, and been doing that for the last 35 years. So I'm excited to meet all of you, and thank you for having me this morning.
Thank you for being here. I appreciate you. All right, Nick, let's go over to you.
Hi. Can everyone hear me?
Yep,
Fine?
sounds
Okay, great. Um, I'm Nick Walzak. I'm a paraplegic. I survived the Chardon High School shooting. Like Sarah said, I've had a service dog and stuff. Um, so my perspective is being in a wheelchair and having had a service dog. That's my experience, my background.
Thank you for being here. All right, so before I dive into our questions for our panelists this morning, I just want to say if anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A or drop them into the chat. If you'd like to ask a question anonymously, you are more than welcome to do so. Just direct it specifically to myself as the host, and I'm happy to read it on your behalf. We've had a lot of folks in our last couple of sessions opt to ask questions that way, so please feel free to do that. And if you, I'm going to change actually our settings right now. I want to make sure if everybody wants to put something in the chat for everyone to see that they are able to do that. There we go. And then, yeah, like I said, if you want to ask anonymously, please feel free to drop it in. I will try to add questions in as we go, or if I see something that I know we're going to get to, I might hold off on it. But please feel free to drop those in as we go along. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and dive into our discussion for today. So I like to start out quickly with a little bit of kind of 101 on this particular community with regard to sort of the language that we use to talk about the disabilities community. And I think there is, you know, a bit of lack of understanding, a bit of confusion there about sort of the way to phrase certain things, the different terminology, what is more acceptable and some language that's more outdated. So I want to start there. So what are some things that people should keep in mind with regard to the language surrounding people with disabilities? And certainly feel free to, you know, share from your own point of perspective. But Krista, why don't we start with you on that one?
So with the language, it's funny. I never, living with a disability for 40 years, I've heard everything, anything from handicapped, disabled, crippled. And honestly, I can tell you it doesn't bother me personally. However, when I gained the title, the president of the organization, she was very critical about words we could utilize throughout our title and made it a point to, she said, handicap's not an accepted word anymore. And that actually kind of blew me away because when you have a placard for your car and everything, people tend to call it a handicapped placard. And so to hear from somebody else that's disabled as well, certain words that people aren't really able to use, it kind of boggles my mind because I guess I have a strong outer shell that I don't really let types of words bother me, but I know they do bother certain individuals. And just be respectful of the individual themselves. I feel like everyone has their own different things that bother them or bother them per se. So when you're meeting individuals out on the streets or in your office or wherever you may be, just be respectful of everyone as an individual, and therefore don't say anything that you don't think they would be accepting of.
Krista, could you give a quick example of a way to kind of phrase, if you were to ask somebody what language they would like you to use, what's a simple way you could ask that to someone? If you saw that someone was a person who utilized a wheelchair, how could you ask them, you know, how would you like me to, what kind of language would you like me to use?
Well, first off, like, don't do it right from the get-go. That's my biggest thing. I'm one of those people. I hate being out in public and hate being somewhere and someone initially, like, before getting to know me as a person, immediately asks, "Oh, what's wrong with you?" That's the biggest thing I can't handle. So I feel like get to know the individual first as a person themselves. And then once you establish that relationship and get a little more comfortable, then you can say to them, how do you feel if I use this word? Does it bother you? So like if I do say handicapped around you, if I do say disabled, would it bother you? But get to know them first before you automatically jump into, oh my gosh, what's wrong with you? Why are you in a wheelchair? And stuff like that.
Great, thank you. Rin, let's go over to you.
I think that language is definitely ever evolving, to echo Krista's point. And I've heard one of the things that I've heard a lot is, I didn't know you were autistic, or you don't seem autistic. And that's not a compliment. Um, so I would really encourage people to try to avoid making those kind of statements, especially saying things like, oh, well, that's your superpower, or whatever other generalized term that people tend to use. I would say just avoiding those is generally a good strategy.
Thank you. Nick, let's go over to you.
Krista was pretty spot on. I would hate to regurgitate exactly what she said, but I have an uncle that still calls me crippled, and it doesn't bother me, but I know that's outdated, and I would never call anybody else in a wheelchair crippled. But you know, it's just something that doesn't really bother me, so I don't pay attention to that a whole lot. But Krista was also right, where you don't just go up to somebody and say, "Hey, handicapped," or you know, something like that. So like, if you ever ease into a conversation, I like to put a blind eye to it. So like, if um, if somebody, you know, ignore it almost. I like to ignore the fact, like, just ignore the fact I'm in a wheelchair, unless it's very obvious you can't. Like if we're trying to get up a set of stairs, like you understand. I'm not offended by anything anybody calls me, as long as it's not intentionally offensive. So that's my input.
Thank you. Sarah, let's go over to you.
I do love what everybody has said so far. I When I was little, my mom probably spent a good week after my diagnosis just, I guess, treating me as her epileptic child, and then realized very quickly that if she kept doing that, that I would wind up tearing the house apart. So she spent the rest of my life, um, well, you cater to the kid, you treat it like it's this delicate little thing, and little 1-year-old Sarah took advantage of that. So I guess the point that I'm trying to get to in the short version is that what we're diagnosed with is only a piece of who we are. I live with epilepsy. I also live with brown hair and green eyes. So, this, hello, my name is Sarah. When you introduce yourself to the world, you are introducing yourself to the world as the entirety of who you are. So it's that diagnosis, whether it be autism, paraplegia, um, whatever it is, epilepsy, cerebral palsy, muscular dystrophy, whatever anybody lives with, it's only a piece of who we are. So yes, my name is Sarah. Talk to me as Sarah. Talk to Krista as Krista. Talk to Nick as Nick. That is our names. That is what we are called. We are not cripples. We are not, there is a lot of talk around, the word disabled, as if it undercuts people's abilities. You know, I think that no matter what group you're belonging to in terms of trying to talk about uplifting positivity, that's the ultimate message, is that you want to highlight people's abilities and focus on who they are, not what you feel they are.
Thank you. And Connor, let's go over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I also know that language is ever evolving. As a gay man and a member of the LGBTQ plus community, like, language is always evolving. I know in that community, my own personal experience for myself doesn't involve much language, but my experience with language revolving around this particular community, I always learned. I had a friend who was a special education major, and she always told me about person first language. And so I've tried to carry that through my life. And basically what that means is, they instead of saying let's say someone is in a special needs class in school. Instead of saying a special needs kid, you would say it's a kid with special needs. So it's just putting the name before the so-called disability. And I've always carried that with me as far as language goes. And they call it person first language. So instead of like labeling somebody, when you put the label in front of the name, they become that only, instead of putting their name in front of it. So I've always just carried that with me, and tried to always think about that. But then of course, like I said, my experience in the gay community has always been with pronouns and all of these different things that have come to fruition over time, and with disabilities and all kinds of things, is to just make sure that the individual, I know what the individual, would like to be, how they would like to be spoken to, and just trying to respect their wishes. So that's what I try to do as far as language goes.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing some of your intersectionality into the conversation as well, because I do think we had a similar conversation last time on our LGBTQ discussion about just listen to the individual and, use the language that they have asked you to use. And it was, just as simple as that. So thank you all for your perspective on that. I appreciate it. All right, so let's jump into our next kind of subject here. So the purpose of the Inclusion by Instinct series is really to help small and medium businesses kind of understand how diversity and inclusion impacts them in that environment. And both from an internal perspective with their hiring and their employees, and these are a lot of folks who have small staff, small teams, but also kind of presenting their business as one that's affirming to a diverse set of folks as their customer and their client and people who might want to patronize their business. So as we look at the community with regard to the financial aspect, what are kind of some of the statistics on that community with regard to what is the percentage of the population of folks that live with disabilities, and what is their overall buying power of that community, just so we can kind of think about how they financially impact our economy here in the United States. So Krista, I see you're unmuting. Do you want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, so a good friend of mine, she's actually Ms. Wheelchair Texas. She actually educated me a lot when I got the title about the population that is affected by disabilities. And it's actually 30% of the population. And that is just currently, and there's always a chance that able-bodied individuals can become disabled any day. And therefore, I feel like with the diversity and inclusion in businesses and everything, I feel like you need to, like, my biggest thing is when I'm going to a business and you don't have the capabilities of getting into the store. Maybe there's a step or something, like I'm in a wheelchair. So therefore, you're losing my business right then and there because I cannot get into your store. You don't have a ramp. You don't have anything that you can bring out to get me in there. So like with the buying power, you're losing money. Basically 30% of the population that you're not including, you're basically telling them that you don't want their money. So therefore, if you did become an inclusive business, that would allow 100% of the population to come, therefore making your sales a lot more than they could have been.
Thank you. Sarah, let's go to you next on that one.
Yeah, I don't claim to be an economist. I will tell you that much. Watching me try and do math is entertaining in and of itself. I think conquering QuickBooks was my greatest accomplishment in the last 3 years. But I will say that, yes, I think in general, Krista, I think you're going to be the queen of this panel as well after we're all said and done. That it is ultimately about accessibility when it comes to spending power. And that could be spending at your local restaurant or retail establishment. I don't know if I just speak for myself, but it came up in all those fabulous articles that you sent us, Megan. That one of the biggest things I think we all have to conquer are just general things like healthcare. How do people get that spending power, accessibility to employment opportunities. A lot of people are dealing with remote work options. A lot of people who struggle with special needs have been dealing with remote work options for a really long time.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Nick, let's go over to you next.
Yeah, so I'm speaking to my experience here. I am a big consumer, so any business that allows me in the door will be happy. I agree again with Krista. If you have stairs in the front of your building, I'm probably just not even gonna try. I'm not even gonna try to go to it. There's a lot of stores around my area that I just avoid now because I know there's no real chance of me getting what I want, unless I had maybe multiple people with me. And even if I did have multiple people with me, it doesn't feel well when a bunch of people are lifting you up a set of stairs to go into a building, and then on top of that, the bathroom might not be accessible. So now I feel kind of stuck and worried, and so at least for being in a wheelchair, it's so important that you're at least visibly accessible for me. Um, yeah, it just needs to be honorable. That's my biggest, thing with it. Just if there's stairs, it it's I'm probably not going to try.
That makes sense. All right, Rin, let's go over to you.
I too am not an economist, especially not at 7:30 in the morning, and my dyscalculia would probably make that very bad. As of now, as far as I'm aware, the percentage of people who are neurodivergent is between 15 and 20%, and the percentage of those who are unemployed is 30 to 40%, and in places like the UK, it's actually as high as 68%. So I've given more than a few presentations in the past on hiring and retention of neurodivergent employees, and I would say to businesses that are hoping to hire and attract neurodivergent talent that you should examine your hiring practices and make sure that your interviewing process and your recruiting process are accessible. And by that, you can allow for extra time for people to answer interview questions. You can avoid things like smart answers, which are tell me about a time when, because those can be really challenging for neurodivergent people to answer. And I would also say healthcare is huge for sure. The cost of health insurance, people will really weigh that out. I know myself as a transgender individual, I have to look over healthcare very, very, very carefully because it's often expensive and or limiting. So having these options and saying out in the open, we support the LGBTQ community, we support the neurodivergent community, helps you attract talent, and then you can work with your HR department and your other members of your organization to define your retention strategies and your growth strategies for your employees that are already at your organization that are neurodivergent. I know that here at US Bank, we just started a neurodiversity chapter of our disability BRG, of which I'm one of our co-chairs. So that's super awesome to see. And things like that go a long way to making people feel like they are welcome and as a part of your organization.
Yeah. And actually, Rin, before I move on to Connor here, I did get a question that came through for someone. They're actually curious about the word neurodivergent and what exactly that is. Is it more of an all-encompassing term of people who might have any and all type of invisible disability, or could you speak to that a little bit?
Oh, I was really hoping somebody would ask that. That's great, actually. I tend to, the way I describe this, and this is not, I speak for myself as I understand this, not for the entire community, is there are two different types of neurodivergence. There's inherited, which is something you were born with, or acquired, that's something as a result of something that's happened to you. So an inherited neurodivergence is, for example, autistic, being dyslexic, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Tourette's, and an acquired neurodivergence is, for example, a traumatic brain injury, complex post-traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, depression, bipolar. All of these are acquired neurodivergences that are or could be a result of something that happened to you. So it's not that was out of your control, but you still deserve support and you still belong in the neurodivergent community. So those are just a few examples of
Great.
neurodivergence.
Thank you. That's very helpful. All right, Connor, I'll go over to you. Anything else you wanted to add?
I don't think so. No, not at this time. I really enjoyed everything else everyone had to say.
All right, sounds good. All right, well, we do have a question in the Q&A, which I'm going to get to in just a second, but I did just want to mention, as far as I know Krista and a couple of other people spoke to the percentage of the population here. So this is a very, very large group of people that we're talking about, people with disabilities, and that runs the spectrum, whether they are visible or invisible disabilities. I am seeing lots of information that says it's around 30%, or 1 in 3 people essentially. So large, huge portion of the population. And the information I've been able to found, globally, people with disabilities have about 8 trillion in spending power. And here in the United States alone, just in disposable income, it's estimated about $500 billion. So about $504 billion just in their disposable income that people with the disabilities community represent. So it's a lot of money that, this community represents from a economic perspective. And so making your business one that is accessible and affirming and provides an environment where, diverse people with different types of disabilities are able to come and patronize your business can certainly help you capture some of the buying power that this community holds. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to this question that we have in the Q&A here, because I think it kind of touches on some of the other ones we wanted to get to anyway, but this is an opinion question for each of you. So this person's asking, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate Cleveland as a welcoming and accessible community for individuals with disabilities, both visible and non-visible? So things like accessible transportation, accommodations, entertainment venues, etc. here in Cleveland. So I don't know if anybody wants to raise their hand and volunteer first on that one. Krista, you're the fastest unmuter I've ever seen. So let's start with you.
How do I rate Cleveland? That's a great question. So I would give Cleveland a 5 out of 10. And that is based on city by city. So all the suburbs of Cleveland, I feel like every single one of them has different things to offer and therefore different challenges when it comes to going to businesses, going to community buildings, going to large venues like Progressive Field, like Rocket Mortgage Field. There's very different challenges, and there's a lot of things when it comes to my platform, community accessibility, that I feel still need to change. And that's in regards to businesses like handicap spots, clearance to get into their organization. And like Nick said, accessible restrooms. That's my biggest thing. I can't tell you how many times different places within Cleveland, in the vicinity of Cleveland, that I've gone to that I have not been able to utilize a restroom. Therefore, that is the last time I go to that facility, because I'm one of those people, if there's not a bathroom that's to my disposal, I gotta go. I'm like literally minutes, like just knowing that I can't use a bathroom, I've got to go. And I can't tell you how many places I've been to. I mean, it's probably in the hundreds within Cleveland that I've gone to that do not have accessible restrooms, especially older establishments. We've all heard of the word, or if you haven't, places are grandfathered in. So a lot of places in downtown Cleveland are grandfathered in. And I hate that word. I hate that verbiage. And I like to tell people, I learned something a couple months ago. A gentleman, he's an accessible traveler. He's in a wheelchair. He's a quadriplegic, and he travels the world and basically tells people what's accessible and what's not. The Colosseum in Rome was built 3,000 years ago, and they made it ADA compliant and accessible. They put an elevator, they put accessible restrooms into this Colosseum. So any establishment that's over 10 years old that claims they're grandfathered in and can't make themselves accessible is a lie. Because if you have a 3,000-year-old establishment you can too.
Thank you. All right, let's see. Anybody want to volunteer to go next on your scale of 1 to 10? How you feel about Cleveland? All right, Nick, let's go to you.
Krista, once again, on point. I've been a lot of places in, America. I've been, California, Texas, Arizona, Florida, New York. Yeah, I've been to a lot of cities, and Cleveland probably isn't the best. It there's a lot of people, it seems, in Cleveland that just don't really understand that um, it's a big damper on my day if I plan on going somewhere, and they just are like, especially about the bathrooms. Like if I go to a restaurant, I need a bathroom. I can't sit there and eat and drink food and have to go to the bathroom and then have to drive home. That's just not really going to happen. But yeah, I would give Cleveland probably 6, 5 or 6, based on my experience. That was very interesting that the Coliseum has an elevator, and the people uptown in my small town say their grandfather did, and they don't have to add a ramp, so I can't get into their restaurant. It's just, Cleveland, probably not the best.
Thank you for sharing. Sarah, did you want to go next?
Sure, though I admit I'm curious to hear Connor's answer to this. I was actually going to go probably, yeah. When I think 1 to 10, I think of like A, B, C, D, E, F, where like a 7 is like a C and a 6 is like a D on what our teachers used to give us. So yeah, I would probably go like a 6, 6.5. When I think about kindness and accessibility, my brain goes to dirty looks, parking over the line, sensory sensitive spacing, and spaces that really are not sensory sensitive. I won't say where I went recently, but the sensory sensitive room was more like a closet that had absolutely nothing sensory sensitive in it. You couldn't even fit a child's wheelchair in it, let alone another child to play in there, or be anything near sensitive about it. And let me tell you, the kid that I was with made his feelings known, and I was proud of him for it. So it was, it's stuff like that. The looks are not appreciated. And it's, yeah, sometimes just understanding that the kind thing that you can do is just keep it walking, is the thing to do.
Thank you. Rin, did you want to go next?
I'm going to come out and say that I haven't been a resident of Cuyahoga County since 2007, so I don't have a leg to stand on here. So based on my past experience, I'm going to go with a 4 or 5 out of 10, but again, I'm going to give it a strong asterisk and say it was also 2007. There wasn't a lot of talk about neurodiversity. There wasn't a lot of accessibility for folks that were neurodivergent, especially in terms of getting jobs or having access to education or similar things. So that was just my experience.
Yeah. Great, thank you. And Connor, did you have anything else you want to jump in with?
Yeah, from my own personal experience, I guess I'm not quite sure how to answer it. Like my own personal experience is that, for a long time, I don't know any different than what I see. So when I think about like accessibility, and I know some part of this was going to be like about ways businesses attract consumers and things, like it's difficult for me to say sometimes because the way that I see the world has always been the way that I see the world. So I don't know I have never personally felt in Cleveland like I wasn't able to access something, but maybe I have missed out on things that I just didn't know about. But I don't know from my personal experience if I have any too much to add to that.
Sort of saying you don't know what you don't know, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let us talk a little bit about, sorry, I'm just trying to keep an eye on our chat here. Yes, and Amanda, thank you very much for pointing this out. The language of grandfathered in is actually a source of much discussion recently, as it has a lot of roots in white supremacy, land ownership, slavery, etc. And so I thank you for pointing that out. That's actually something that's sort of come to the mainstream, I guess, on that language, but I don't know that there's a lot of helpful recommendations that I've heard yet. And Amanda, if you have some and can drop them in the chat on replacement language for using the term grandfathered in, would be super helpful. If you've heard of anything, I'd love you to drop it in the chat. Okay, so let's jump into a little bit more of some specific questions for each of you with regard to your personal experience. So a lot of you have touched on this already, and I'm going to see if we can dive just a little bit deeper. So how can a business create an environment of inclusivity for people with disabilities? Certainly, we've talked about the actual physical barriers that if you're someone who's using a wheelchair, if there are stairs, the restroom, etc. They are obviously initial barriers, but going beyond that, of course, if a business says it's ADA compliant, is that enough? What has your personal experience been that would help you to patronize a business? And also thinking not just about brick and mortar. So what are some ways that people maybe have utilized technology or other resources that have allowed you to perhaps patronize a business that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise been able to do so? So Nick, let's go ahead and start with you.
Yeah. So I was kind of waiting for this question to come up because I've had it in my head since you asked me to be on this panel. There are two things in my town that have happened, and the first one is if you're not accessible and you add other options, which is okay if you have stairs and you could still dine outside. So I'll still go to a restaurant like that, and I have. The problem is with my experience, it hasn't been done really right. Once they tell you, okay, you can dine outside. Once we dine outside, they'll do things like they won't give you happy hour prices because you're not at the bar. And this is personally, this was on my birthday. I wanted a drink, and they said, well, happy hour prices are at the bar only. And we're sitting right outside on the front patio with multiple stairs into the front building. And, it was a little disrespectful, I feel, just because I can't go up to the bar and grab the drink myself. It means I don't get the discount everybody else is getting. It was just that was a little weird to me. And the other thing was the use of technology really helps people like me out. When COVID happened, it seemed like the world almost adapted to what I needed. Like groceries are being delivered to my house now, which is crazy to think about. But I always wondered what am I going to do when I need to go grocery shopping and I'm by myself. So I think technology is a huge thing that small businesses can use to attract customers like me. Um, Even if it's just a sign by a handicap spot that says, if you need assistance or if you need us to grab something that's in the building and there's stairs up to the building, just give us a call. Here's our number that you call. Tell us what you need and we'll be out. Just a small sign That's all it would take, and a phone number. I feel like if businesses really opened up to kind of what happened with COVID, it would help people with disabilities buy things from your store.
I think that's extremely insightful. And I will say, even just thinking beyond that, even as the mother of someone with small kids, you think about, you got your kids in your car, you got to run into the store and you don't want to lug them out. That's a whole nother, the lessons from COVID of curbside service that, some of those takeaways can affect so many different types of people in lots of different situations. I think that's incredibly helpful, Nick, to think about such a simple step somebody could take to really make a difference and be able to allow somebody to patronize a business. Connor, I'm curious, I want to jump to you on this one. Being colorblind, any tips or insights you have if a business is thinking about their marketing materials, their signage, things they're putting out into the world to a colorblind person would make it easier for you to see and read more easily?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I've met a lot of other individuals who are colorblind, like just by happenstance every once in a while. I mean, it is a genetic thing that usually occurs from your mother's father, oddly enough, and it's mostly male. I think it's like 99%. I could be wrong about that, but as far as marketing goes, like some of the things that I experience is like, a lot of marketing can be like people use colors to convey a certain sense of feeling, right? And I don't grab onto that. Like it's never really made any sense to me. So like, for example, as a real estate agent, all of my marketing is black and white. One, because I think it's chic, but two, because like, I don't know, colors don't evoke emotion for me. Necessarily. Like I understand what they're trying to do, like by red meaning like angry, but it just doesn't quite make sense for me or something like that. So as far as like going into stores, most of my I guess you could call them struggles or just the things that I live with come in retail. I don't know if there's retail small businesses on here or not. But like I don't luckily, like I'm pretty open about it. So I'll ask random people questions in the store and I kind of make new friends that way. Because I love clothes, but I don't buy things that I don't know what they are. And if no one's there to ask what color they are, if this matches, I don't buy them. So I would say, when I go to bigger stores, like I have people who will help me like pick out outfits and things like that. So most of where I run into the issues that I have are in retail clothing stores, just because I have never been able to. So I don't know. I've always thought like for example, my grandpa was colorblind, and my grandma always labeled all of his suits with the colors that they were. So if you weren't wearing like a whole suit that matched, she put like what colors this shirt has, and so you can wear this suit with this one and stuff like that. So I've always thought that businesses could potentially maybe label things in that way as far as retail goes. But as far as marketing goes, I think I'm not sure if people could use like colors that don't look alike. Like for me, like I can't tell blue and purple apart. I can't tell other certain shades apart, and I see a whole different shade than everybody else does. Therefore, I can't distinguish between colors. So I think as far as marketing goes, I think if people just could keep in mind that like the simpler the better, and that if you're trying to invoke some kind of emotion with your marketing, it might not make sense to somebody who's colorblind, and you might not be reaching those people. So if like that's your goal with the color, then it might not make much sense.
That's super helpful. Thank you. Krista, you want to go next?
I'm getting there. I really think Nick nailed it on the head in regards to like when COVID happened and all the technology that happened along with it, and getting groceries. Like I do the same. I have groceries delivered. I think a big thing is to add a little bit more, because like I said, having assistance, having a sign put up with a phone number to call for assistance, like if you can't get into wherever you're going, that's awesome. But also adding to the fact that there's been several places, I mean, I know in Berea per se, that I'd like to go to, but they're 2 floors and then there's like a set of stairs. So maybe if you have a business that you don't have the funds to put, I'm sorry, you don't have the funds to put like a lift or an elevator to allow me to get up to your 2nd floor, then maybe having technology, like I have an iPhone, and maybe having an iPad at your store, or having a device that you could show me what's up on the top floor. Just because I can't get up there, why not allow me to see things? Because if I don't see what I'm looking for on the bottom, it would be nice to be able to see other things. This has nothing to do with businesses, but like my girlfriend, she bought a house and I wanted to see the indoors, but I couldn't get into her house and I couldn't get up to her 2nd floor. So she took me for a tour on her iPhone. Like we both FaceTimed each other and I was able to see that way. Unfortunately, it doesn't give you, like, I'm one of those people, I like things in person, but to have that advantage as well, to see things that I can't see physically, helps a lot as well.
Thank you. And Sarah, I'm going to go over to you, certainly to speak to your personal experience, but also as director of WAGs for Kids and working with so many people who utilize service animals. If you could speak a little bit to that too, as far as how businesses can be inclusive of folks who do utilize service animals, that would be great to speak to as well. We do have a question in the chat about that.
Absolutely. Well, on a professional note, I guess being just attending a session like this and being open to learning is a step in the right direction for sure. I think one of the biggest challenges that we have in the service dog community is, speaking of languaging, people not really understanding what a service dog is, or misusing that terminology. There is a difference. There's a spectrum of working animals, just like there's a spectrum of a heck of a lot of stuff. And a service dog, by definition, is a dog paired with a person with a specific disability, to do for them that which they cannot do for themselves, and or something that serves the specific disability. So that makes it distinctively different than a therapy dog, which is your happy-go-lucky pet that you maybe got trained by good canine companions and certified to go into senior homes and hospitals and make people smile, which especially this time of year is really awesome if you ever want to do that. Or an emotional support dog, which is a whole different level of mental health diagnoses that stops at debilitating. It stops at, I can't leave my house. It stops at, I need the dog to get me medication, or I can't get out of bed. Or, I mean, the levels that we work with that is a psychiatric service dog are kids that have stopped going to school, are people that don't go to work, are bipolar and dissociative personality disorder. And that's that. Emotional support dogs are, let's say, postpartum depression, which is, yes, a depressive disorder, and it's temporary. And your dog brings you comfort. And so you have the ability and the accessibility to bring them with you everywhere. And it stops at public access. And so I don't know if we want me to cross over into what the questions are that you're allowed to ask.
Yeah, that would be great. You might as well just dive right into it.
Just do the darn thing. Okay, so there are 2 questions that you're allowed to ask when you see a person out. And I would say that as a small business, or any business really, I would not ask questions unless you see the dog violating the rules of the ADA, which is that this animal should be a dog. Let's start there. The animals that are covered by the ADA are dogs and mini horses. They are not cats. They are not peacocks. They are not owls. They are not lizards. They are not anything else that you've seen in the New York Times or any other news place that people have tried to sneak on airplanes or anything. And I will say that the airlines have a totally different list of rules, and check your local airline before you try and get on an airplane. You definitely need to declare your service animal before you get on an airline. And dogs need to not bark, not growl, not get in anybody's faces. They also need to be on the ground, not on your lap or on the chair next to you. They need to not be fed pancakes off the table. They're supposed to be, by some definition, invisible. That's why our dogs are awesome. You can't even hear them next to me. They're silent. So the two questions, should you need to ask, are, is this your service dog? And what tasks is it trained to do for you? And that is how you can approach someone with a service dog, hopefully, is what that actually is. Because if you're feeling the need to ask, there's probably some disturbing behavior going on. And that person should be given the opportunity to correct that behavior at least once. But to just to be redundant once, the fact that somebody is willing to educate themselves, to come here and to learn what they are allowed to ask, to learn the differences, is a huge step in the right direction. And a short personal note, I would say photosensitivity is a big thing that chases me away. Strobes for sure. And I know that clubs can't always choose, but around this time of year, when you're putting up Halloween decorations, you can, I don't think we always think about the things that we choose. You don't always need to have the thing that you put in front of your house be the stroby scary light that would make maybe somebody else have a seizure on the spot. And for me, I'm going home saying, okay, now I feel my skin tingle. And now I know that the minute that I lay my head down to go to sleep, I'm not going to be able to fall asleep. But the minute that I do, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to have a seizure. And it's a trigger, and all that, it's space, it's sound, it's light. And if you do contact the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities, they actually will send therapists out to your establishment and sort of do a scan of the area and make suggestions as to how you can improve your spacing, etc.
Great. Thank you so much. And Rin, let's go over to you.
I'm going to actually echo what Sarah said. I feel like COVID also, like Nick mentioned, really helped because people were more willing to take risks that they may not have taken before in business, such as e-commerce, setting up an online store where people could order things that they may have only been able to order in person, where they had to go into a building. They could now order on the internet. Or they were introducing things like iPads, kiosks, technology where they were more willing to put a camera in somewhere and drive around a drone to show people around because they couldn't do it in person. And they were having things like earlier grocery hours where they did the lights. It was quiet. There was no loud music playing at the store, and people were more that are neurodivergent and had sensory processing challenges were able to better utilize those services. And I feel like a lot of that has actually gone away. And I feel like for a lot of businesses, if you don't have an online storefront, it's one little thing that you can do to be more accessible. And if you do, you can also utilize things like alt text for your images. So people with screen readers are able to grasp better what your images are, because they're without that alt text, they're not going to know what your lovely pictures of your products are.
Great. Thank you. All right, so let's move in a little bit to kind of the talent side for people who are business owners. So I want to start by saying that for those who aren't aware, October is National Disability Employment Awareness Month. So happy National Disability Employment Awareness Month to everyone. But with that, I wanted to point out, so I guess the question is, do you all believe, especially given what's going on in our job market right now with, you know, the lack of talent, available for a lot of positions. Do you believe that there is an untapped potential within the disability community with regard to filling a lot of the positions that we have available in our current market? So if anybody could speak to that, or creative ways that businesses might think about utilizing different people with disabilities to fill roles or things that they may need done. Maybe RIN neurodivergent folks and thinking about kind of gigging out things that you might need done for your business to remote employees who could help with a very particular project or task. I guess any insight you could share in that regard would be great. So I don't know, RIN, could we start with you?
Sure. I feel like the gig economy is really important. I think it's a nice way for folks that may have had challenges with traditional employment in the past to experience that. I think that it allows a lot of flexibility. I also think that things like part-time employment are really beneficial. And like I said earlier, just really refining your hiring processes and making sure that you're not screening people out before they even get to interviews. It's really crucial that folks understand that if you ask a neurodivergent person a question, depending on who they are, they might answer it really honestly. And some people do not like that, because if you ask someone a question, especially someone that's autistic, they're going to give you an honest answer. And the thing is, autistic individuals, some of them won't know that what they actually want you to do is lie. They don't want you to tell them the truth. They want you to give them the neurotypical answer that is in a certain way, that follows a certain path, that mentions certain things. And if you don't answer and you give them the actual truth based on your experiences, you won't get a job. So I think that's really important, is that don't try to trick people. Don't give them those trick questions. Don't, if you ask a question of someone that's neurodivergent, don't expect a canned answer. And if you do, make that really aware up front. I really find that would be a good first step for sure.
Great. Thank you. Connor, I'm going to go to you. You got anything else you want to chime in with regard to the talent conversation?
Not, I don't know if I have anything to share from personal experiences. I've been a 1099 for quite a while and haven't had to look for a job necessarily in quite a long time. But I will. I mean, to me, it's always obvious that there's untapped talent that employers don't gain access to, whether it's through accessibility or prejudices or any of those kinds of things. So I've always, I know my friends who own small businesses and things like that. I think obviously it's important to make it super apparent that you provide the support that people in different communities who may be marginalized or discriminated against or have prejudice against, that they know that this place is somewhere where they can, have gainful employment. And this goes again, like, not, I know this isn't the LGBT panel, but for the gay community, for the community with disabilities, like all these kinds of things, right? Like we've always been pushed aside, and obviously, like there's certain things that I know as a gay man I've always been scared to share or be honest about in interviews, not knowing like that this organization supports who I am. And I think the same thing goes with any community that is kind of on the outskirts necessarily of society, or however you want to reference it. And so, yeah, I think it's really cool that, nowadays I do see more companies coming forward, and whether it's suddenly or very abrasively in a good way, coming out and saying like, these are the things that we provide to employees, and you're going to be safe here, and we want to make sure that you can stay here and not feel judged. I was a social worker at a nonprofit for some years, and so my experience was good. Like fortunately I've never had a bad experience, because I guess it comes along with the nature of hanging out with social workers in a nonprofit, but like it just like everyone is kind of on that tip already. At least that was my experience, where like I never felt that I couldn't share something about myself, like whether it be like my disability or who I am. And so, yeah, I think, making it aware on your website and making it aware through advertisements, like however you want to do that, you're going to attract people. Like people who have always been on the outskirts of society are a huge population, and sometimes the most creative and talented people in the world. And you're going to miss out on those individuals unless you let them know that, like, you know, we're here to support you. So, you know, people who have been pushed down by society tend to be very strong and tend to be very resourceful. And so I think, you know, if you don't do those things, you're missing out on a large pool of really awesome, you know, possible employees.
Thank you. Krista, should we go over to you?
Yeah, so I agree with basically everything Rin and Connor have said thus far. My one thing that I can add is I actually I feel like there's I'm trying to like gather the words. I was trying to gather it before like I unmuted. But there's like a perception that I feel like some people get, and I have a couple girlfriends and actually a gentleman who has now become a friend, and they are the most intelligent individuals you will meet, but they actually speak with a talking device because they have cerebral palsy. But the most intelligent individuals. And I feel like there's a misperception that people automatically assume based on a person like their appearance or their outer shell that they're incompetent or not able to handle certain things and therefore not being able to be employed because of the way they look, because of the way they appear. So I think my biggest thing that I can add to this question is don't always judge a book by its cover. Like there's tons of individuals out there, able, disabled, that don't automatically jump to what you think they're going to be like, because there's a lot of intelligent people out there. And if you just give them a chance, you might be able to see that.
All right. Thank you. Nick, let's go over to you.
So when it comes to employment, I don't have a whole lot to add, but if you did employ somebody with a disability, then I believe you probably get some very good feedback on what you need to do better. Your employee would be a lot more open about what's going on than a customer may be, because the customer can just leave. The employee is stuck there. They're and they're getting paid, so they'd probably like to see more people with their disability as well. Or so yeah, that's really all the input I have on that.
Great. Thank you. Sarah, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
I don't know. Everybody seems to have sort of covered it. I know it can, from the hiring side, it can maybe sometimes feel intimidating to ask some of these personal questions of your employees, given the Ohio labor laws and everything. But I would encourage everyone to really absorb what the rest of the panelists had to say and maybe conquer some of those personal fears, even if it does mean, prefacing those questions by saying, do you mind if we have a transparent conversation? And taking that next step in your relationships with your employees, and you may discover some pretty amazing things.
All right, well, I just want to point out there is amazing stuff happening in the chat. So if you're not paying attention, read through it because lots of good things. Rin, thank you for providing your perspective. I appreciate that very much. Lots of good suggestions and things going on in there. I did also, before we move on, I did receive a question here, just an anonymous question that I wanted to bring up. So Nick is somebody who utilizes a service animal, and Sarah, certainly in your experience with lots of folks who utilize service animals, this person is kind of asking whether it's okay to sort of acknowledge or maybe greet the animal if you do see somebody who uses a service animal. This is the question, is sort of like, I think this person's kind of getting at, like, do we pretend the dog isn't there, or how do you correctly address them? So Nick, let's start with you.
I was just going to go first because I know Sarah knows all the answers and I want to take some of them. So you're not supposed to touch the service dog. Don't touch the service dog. Don't touch it. Just don't touch them. But you can ask. You can ask because You know, if you have a service dog, you know you're not really supposed to. You yourself are not supposed to touch this service dog if it's working. I mean, even the owner is not supposed to touch this. Really touch. You're not really even supposed to talk to the dog when it's working. So, you know, it's okay, I think, if you were to politely ask, but if you're politely declined, I wouldn't keep asking, and I'd take that as an answer, because there is a reason why they told you not to touch it. Probably not because it's dangerous, but because it has this precious training. And if you keep breaking these rules, the dog is going to expect to be pet, out in public while it has a service vest on, and that's not something service dogs are supposed to do. So that's my experience with the service dog animals.
Okay, great, thank you. Sarah, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Don't talk to the dog, please. I read Amanda's comment. Eyes are up here. Consent of it, like, eyes up here. What are you looking at? I hope the ladies can laugh at that joke. I saw your comment, Amanda, where you said what you usually do is say, you're working so hard. That means you're talking to the dog, sweetie. Please don't talk to the dog. When Nick is talking about asking consent, you're asking consent of the owner. And I'm not working hard. I'm asking my dog to work. And the dog wants to work. And by talking to the dog, you're distracting it from its job. I probably have a reel. Nick, I just interviewed like 3 more families for a video for our event that we just had. And when I asked them the question of what they should brace themselves for as they, for families that are still on the yellow brick road, they maybe haven't gotten their dog yet, but what should they prepare themselves for? The number 1 response was, be prepared for everybody to want to touch and talk to your dog. I know, but you can restrain yourself. I believe in you. I believe in you because, as one of our WAGS moms said, a classroom full of 7 and 8-year-olds and her daughter, that she takes her dog to school, they too can restrain themselves. They have a dog in their classroom and they don't touch the dog. So if they can, I believe in you. You can. And so can a population full of people. So really, this is what we mean by, this is what acceptance means, and this is what inclusion means. We'll get into that answer later. I have an inspiring Rudy style pep talk to give everyone, but no, really, that's what you're distracting it from a job, and not knowing what that job is that the dog is doing, you could be distracting it from paying attention to something that is life-altering and life-saving. For some of these little kids that are somewhere different on the spectrum, you could be distracting a dog that is keeping a child from eloping. Thank you, Rin. I'll leave it there.
Great, thank you. All right, so let's see, where I want to be conscious of time and make sure we get to some of the good stuff here before we wrap up today. So I want to touch quickly on sort of allyship, and we've talked obviously, of course, about the different ways that businesses can accommodate different people with disabilities in terms of their physical space, utilizing technology, being conscious of different things that people may have going on, providing spaces for people that may be neurodivergent, a lot of these great examples. But I wanted to talk a little bit too about allyship in terms of sort of being an effective ally versus being a performative ally. And what I mean by that is, I always use the example of Pride. You see a lot of companies during June who throw a rainbow logo up, and then on July 1st it's down, and you look at the company policies of that organization, and they are supporting causes and candidates that are anti-LGBTQ. They don't have trans-affirming healthcare. They're basically they're talking the talk, but they're not walking the walk. So when we look at the disability community, what are some examples of sort of effective allyship and advocacy on behalf of the disability that a business might be able to do that would actually be something that could be effective? So Ren, I noticed in the chat there were different things about just having a symbol available at your business to indicate that you are an affirming space for folks who might be on the autism spectrum or who might be neurodivergent or things like that. Are there any other examples that y'all might be able to share where you can actually kind of communicate that message of allyship? So Rand, I don't know if we could start with you.
I would say, ooh, that's a good one. Allyship for me is just support and inclusion and making space at the table. So that's what I would say. Make space and allow for accommodations and always be learning and realize that just make things accessible, make things inclusive, and just be open to understanding and learning.
Great, thank you. Krista, let's go to you.
I think my biggest thing is just not making it a guessing game. Like I've been to so many places that they might be accessible, like there might be an area in the back that I can go through to their business, but in the front to my eye, it doesn't look like it's accessible, whether that be a staircase or a step or something. But then there's like no sign or no nothing that's telling me, oh, if you go to the back of our store, you'll be able to get in. So just making it not a guessing game wherever I'm going. If you do have an accommodation, put it on your door, put it somewhere, put a sign, just make me aware. Therefore, I still know that I can come in versus leaving and not knowing if I could have got in or not.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Anybody else want to chime in on this one? Yeah, Nick, let's go to you.
Yeah, so there's a gas station in my local town, and they have handicap buttons on their gas pumps. And you reach for that button, you press it, and somebody is supposed to come out and see what you need. But the buttons don't work. So, there could be like, it's nice that they have the button, right? Because I know that if I were to call them, they're already aware that there's a button here and they're supposed to come out to help. So that helps alone, because even if you were to pick up the phone and call the store themselves and tell them, hey, this button's not working, that's better than nothing. But when I think of the word ally, I think friend, and you can say you're a friend, but then you're not really a friend. You, if you are my friend, at least really try to be my friend. Try to help me out. If you're saying you're gonna help me out, I'm gonna utilize that help. But if that help isn't really effective, then you're not really helping.
Yeah, I would agree. I'll just say my mom has mobility challenges and uses a scooter most of the time. There's nothing more disheartening than seeing a handicap button or something and pushing it and having it not work. And you think like, oh, this is great, I can get in here. And then to find out that you can't because something isn't working is almost even sometimes more defeating, because you were so hyped that you were going to be able to get in somewhere and then find out that it actually doesn't do anything. So thank you for sharing that. And Connor, I know you had your hand raised. I want to go to you next.
Yeah, I love this question because I think being an ally holds a certain title to any community, and so like I think of it in like two different categories. Like you call it performative allyship, which I love, and I've never heard of that. And I think there's a lot of that happens with the advent of social media and media in general and advertising, and always trying to push a certain agenda to get consumers to buy their products. But when I think of individuals and allyship, I personally, the way I think about it, and this has to do with businesses or just employers in general, people in HR, whoever it is, like I think allyship a lot of the time happens behind closed doors. And what I mean by that is like, I think that anyone can do some sort of performative allyship in a public setting or with words saying that, like, we talked about language in the beginning, and we know that language is so important. And, I think that behind closed doors, being an ally is that if someone's using language that could be hurtful to a person with disabilities, taking the time to educate them and stand up for them, not necessarily a mean way, but in a loving way. And I think that the more that you can do that as an ally of, different kinds of communities, you will learn to spread the awareness. I think sometimes people need someone in their life who they love, who has a certain experience, to start spreading that awareness of language and accessibility and all these kinds of things for there a change to really be happening. So when I think of an ally, like it's someone who, like I always call them like staunch allies, like meaning like they're going to defend you, and it doesn't have to be in a mean way necessarily, but they're not, if they hear someone using certain kind of language, they're going to correct them and explain why. They're not just going to let it go by. Like, people my whole life have been like allies or whatever. But I call them like they're supportive. But will they go to bat for me or other people with disabilities, or will they go to bat for people who are LGBT and all these kinds of things? So I love the word performative ally. I'm going to start using that because I think it's really cool. And, what I try to do always is, like, again, I go back to the language and certain words, like being in, having friends who are in special education, like the R word and things like that, I make sure that I stand up for those things and be an ally for people in those communities, behind closed doors, in front of people, making sure if I'm in a group of people and someone's using language or doing things that could be hurtful to a friend that I'm with who's a member of that community, that I'm letting that friend know that when you're with me or behind closed doors, I'm here to make sure you feel comfortable and that you're always accepted by me. So that's kind of my opinion on that. I think if people could work on doing that in a loving way, it makes such a big difference. It's like a domino effect, and I think ways in a big way that most people don't know about. So
Thank you for sharing that, Connor. And yes, I will say, a lot of people think just because they're not against something that makes them an ally, but you have to remember that being an ally is a verb. You have to actually take action and step in and advocate on behalf of a community. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. All right, and Sarah, I know you have a rousing speech, so I'm going to start with you on this last question here as we start to try and wrap up. But I just want to kind of touch on each of our panelists today and just sort of have you, if you could just sort of summarize, in general, how does diversity make business better? And if you could just, speak a little bit to that, or, from a social perspective, from a financial perspective, from a community perspective, how does being inclusive, being affirming, how can it make business better? So Sarah, I'm going to start with you.
Well, I guess I got ahead of myself there. Let me say I loved everybody's answer to the last question. Thank you guys. And hopefully even this panel gives everybody a little glimpse into what having multiple perspectives in your life can bring to your business. It can be it's a very small world if all you have is a tunnel vision into your business. So to bring diversity into your community, to bring diversity into your small business, into your organization, it can open your world. Even if your world is little tiny town Berea, it can make a huge difference. So I appreciate everybody being here and allowing us into your little worlds.
Thank you. Did you have anything else I didn't ask that you wanted to really get people pumped with? Because I don't want to miss out on that.
No, I very much agree with what everybody else said. Actions do speak louder than words, and consistency is key. So I hope that what everybody takes away from this is an excitement to stay consistent and to make a friend when before you maybe would have just hesitated to say hi to that person that was in the wheelchair or was doing that thing that you didn't necessarily recognize. One thing that when we go into classrooms and we talk to kids about making friends and inclusion and things, we sort of see that teeter off when you get to middle school and high school, and they don't necessarily go outside their little group of friends. And as adults, it might even be a little bit harder, but hopefully as adults, we have the perspective and the perception to be able to say, you know what? Yeah, I'll go say hi. I'll be a kind human and go make a friend. It's just because someone has an apparatus or has an invisible whatever. It's everybody is hungry for community. I think especially since everything happened with COVID, and hopefully what the last couple of years have provided all of us with is the eagerness to lend that community, not only to ourselves, but to others as well. Let's group hug, people. Can we not? Can we just group hug? Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to be motivated right into my Thursday. So thank you. I appreciate that. All right, Rin, let's go over to you. Just any general thoughts on how diversity inclusion makes business, makes community better?
It makes it better because everyone comes from so many different experiences and so many different backgrounds. And by being more inclusive and being more open, you introduce yourself not only to a lot of opportunities, but a lot of amazing people that you might otherwise miss out on meeting. So I think that's a huge opportunity. Just be open and be welcoming because you never know who you're going to meet.
Thank you. Nick, let's go over to you.
So there's, there's showing your support and then actually like giving your support. So, the first step is displaying, we are inclusive, we have accessibility options, but the second thing is following through with that and making sure your employees are trained on that topic too, because it reflects poorly on your business if your employees don't understand you know what accessibility options you provide, or they don't have an answer to something that you already do, but you just never told them about it. um, I keep thinking about when I was dining out on the patio and I didn't get the happy hour prices. I'm not going back to that restaurant. I won't go back to that restaurant because I specifically felt excluded from everybody else. And I think that's really what you don't want to do. You don't want to exclude anybody. And it doesn't matter what they look like, doesn't matter, if they're in a wheelchair, doesn't matter if they're straight, gay. You have to be inclusive. You have to show it. You can't just say you are, and then not tell your employees what to do when something like this happens. So, yeah, that's about it.
I love that. And if you don't have employees who represent a variety set of diverse communities, you can always consult with folks who are members of those communities and, reach out to them and have them give their opinion and then pay them for their time, because consulting is a job. So think about that and utilizing resources in your community. If it's not somebody you have on staff or somebody you have in life, there are certainly people that can come and talk to you about their experiences. And maybe like today, you'll have some very helpful tips. I love a lot of what y'all have shared about your examples and things that people can do today. But so that's always an option as well. Connor, let's go over to you.
I just want to say that I've learned so much from everyone sharing today, just about different aspects of your daily life. And I really appreciate the vulnerability and, and the willingness to share. So thank you so much for that. And then, of course, I'll just always echo, it's just kind of what everyone else has been saying about being vocal about, inclusion in the workplace. And I really loved the idea or the thought that having someone, if you do have someone in your workplace who is a member of a disabled community or any other kind of community, to really lean on them, because a lot of times those individuals will be willing to share their experiences, and there's no better person to learn from than the horse's mouth. So I'll echo that, and that's it. I appreciate everyone. Thank you so much.
And Rin, thank you for dropping this in the chat. And you are absolutely correct that bad experiences tend to spread much faster than good ones. So if you can provide a good experience for your customers, you're much more likely to see the maybe not so easy to track, but certainly the positive ripple effect of that in terms of people continuing to patronize your business. Krista, do you want to take it home for us?
Well, everybody going last is so hard because everybody basically said everything I wanted to say. But when you ask the question, what does being diverse and inclusive mean? It honestly means everything. And having your business be both of that, shows compassion and kindness towards all, regardless of anyone's abilities. And therefore, if you're not necessarily advertising, but like you said, Megan, like Rin said, word of mouth travels. I am one of those people. If I go to a place and I feel welcomed, I feel like everything met my expectations regarding ADA compliancy, regarding getting in and out, the compassion shown to me by individuals that are working at the place. Like if I had questions, people wanting to answer, wanting to help me out, that goes a long way. And by me leaving there, having a great experience, it's going to make me more apt to telling people about your establishment, about what I experienced and why it's a great place to go and patronize. And so therefore, just everybody said it completely well. Just my biggest motto throughout having my title as Ms. Wheelchair Ohio is kindness is contagious. And we can all utilize that. So therefore, just knowing like whoever's coming into your business, if you don't have something that's necessarily, if it's a disabled individual and like, say you have an extra spot that's in your place, like I've been to stores that have a step up into another area that I could necessarily not get into. Just having that compassion, like, I'm never one of those people that's going to complain or going to sit there like, oh, I might as well leave this place because I can't get into that area. But like, if I go up to a person and I say, oh, can you explain a little bit about what's in that area? Just having that kindness, like be willing to help. And therefore, I feel like just utilizing that and making sure all of your employees, regardless if you're the owner of a business or regardless if you are the employee of a business, just showing kindness to everybody that comes into your establishment regardless.
Thank you. All right. Well, I want to thank all of these amazing panelists for joining us today and bringing such unique perspectives to this conversation. I think this was incredibly helpful. I appreciate all of your information, all of the tips you've shared. It's been awesome. I want to give one more quick shout out to our sponsors. Thank you, BW and Cuyahoga Community College, for your support. We're so glad to have been able to offer this and reach a lot of folks. The recording will be available up on our website for those who weren't able to attend today. And with that, I will thank our panelists once again. Thank you to everyone for joining us. If it's okay with our panelists, I'd like to share there at least a link to contact them on LinkedIn or find them in case you want to follow up with them with any individual questions that you have. I'll confirm that's okay with all of them and then share that out with our audience today. And with that, we will wrap up. Have a wonderful Thursday. Happy almost Halloween. And thank you all for being here. Have a good rest of the day, everyone.